Hi there, BookTube. In a recent video on book covers, I made the admission that I'd never ever bought a book simply on the strength of its cover, but is the same for book titles. So imagine the scene, you're browsing in a bookshop, you have no particular idea of a book you want, and there's sort of, some of the books are laid out flat on the table, there's sort of stuff they're trying to offer you. Others, you've just got the spines. And the advantage, of course, just having the spine is you're only going to get the title and the author name on that, whereas on the table, the title may be less easy to spot. And I have to admit, I have bought books simply on the strength of the title. And the first one is The Equations of Life by Simon Morden. And there's something about that title that intrigued me that I didn't sort of interpret it as the equations, like the chemical equations of DNA that form proteins that form us. Something more metaphysical about it, that, can human life and sort of purpose and morality and all these questions, good and evil, do they submit to sort of mathematical equations? And I rather hoped this book was going to touch on that. It wasn't a great book. The main character had a pacemaker and yet was able to do all these amazing escape from danger and stuff. And it was part of it was the first one in a series of 3, and I must admit I didn't buy the other 2, and so I never really did discover what the equations of life were. Next one, Jeanette Winterson, Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal? Now, I'm a huge Jeanette Winterson fan, so I probably would have bought this anyway, but what a fantastic title. And basically, in case you don't know, Oranges Are the Only Fruit is Winterson's first book, which is based on her own sort of life story as an adopted child into a sort of mad sort of Christian version of Christianity, and the sort of terrible upbringing and the war that she was always with her parents. And this is a sort of a continuation of this, where she actually goes in search of her actual birth mother, and it also touches on how she found refuge in books and libraries when she'd been literally kicked out of home and was living in her car. It's a fantastic book, but Winston is a great writer, and apparently Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal is what her adoptive mother said to her when she sort of said, I'm going to look for my new, my real mother. Dated MCs, Chenika Hodge. Now, I definitely bought this on the strength of the title because it's poetry, and I don't really read a lot of poetry, but Chenika Hodge sort of hung around hip-hop artists in the States, and this is a set of poems sort of based on her experiences. So this one's called Title Track. I'm not going to read the whole poem. No jazzmen left. I date MCs. Tries to rehabilitate them into honest working stiffs. I foot the bills, handle the losses they come. Loud, leave softly, fall short, break, daylight, gone. I confess I love fast, dishonest words, thoughts, childish aliases. Men who change their names, forced rhyme, divulge their governments, and then forgot mine, the lames I held on too long, way past time. The poems in the first part of the book are about her experiences, or based on her experiences, being in that sort of hip hop and rap scene, and they're great. And then after that, there's lots of poems that don't seem to be from that world. So it's half a good book, but I bought it on the strength of the title. Partial List of People to Bleach by Gary Lutz. I mean, what a title! Probably of all the titles, this is the most sort of one that makes you just stop up short. Partial List of People to Bleach. Now, I'd read a Gary Lutz collection of short stories before, so I knew that I'd be reading anything by him. He writes these short stories that have amazing sort of word detonations in them. See if I can give you an example. Night was a portal to the morning, maybe, but morning was no gateway. At the office campus, a couple of new hires on my level, a woman and a man. The man was in his meridian 20s, not a quick one to colour. It was all I could do to show him the quickest way to disable a paperclip so it could no longer get a purchase on the pages. How to refuse food from people who came in one day with new teeth shingled over the old. They were spatterdash cookies all week, the week we started. It's just, it's great stuff. It's a book that operates at the level of the sentence rather than the story, which is quite interesting. Ella Minnow P by Mark Dunn. Now, I've talked about this in my video on the lipogram, because this book is a lipogram, which is where you leave out an element consistently through a book. In this case, letters disappear from the alphabet, and Dunn's characters cannot use them. They are censored from using them. I didn't buy this book on the strength of the title. In fact, the title only came to me after I'd finished it, which is really dim of me. L-M-N-O-P, as in L-M-N-O-P in the sort of the alphabet song, because these letters start disappearing from the alphabet. So it's a great title, but it's not actually one that made me buy the book. Intimate Cartographies, L.A. Alexander, who's a writer I've never heard of since, but I totally bought this book on the strength of the title. The notion of sort of maps of the self, of the dark areas, the unexplored areas, the areas of sex and stuff. And I can't remember a lot about the book. I know that the character felt very sort of two-dimensional, and sort of her cartography, her inner cartography, sort of set off three-dimension. As she sort of discovered secrets and things that she'd repressed about herself. Seems to be an actual series of maps in here. I don't know if you can see these. Rather beautiful. As I say, I don't really remember much about the book, but I just want to read a section here. According to the rule of non-penetrative sex, your bodies may do everything but tease, tickle, tongue, brush, rub, caress, stroke, etc. Desire is stimulated. The conjugation of surface bodies is exciting, yet kind and respectful. Parry, deflect, slide and glide, but remain within your own skin. In other words, no invading. No breaking and entering, no enveloper or enveloped, no yin-yang of body parts. You can touch and be touched, but you may not dissolve into one. That is against the rules. Still you are two. You are you and he is he. So, just picking that, I'd actually sort of bookmark that with the dust jacket sleeve. I might actually read this again because I really don't recall much about it, but I mean, I love that little section. Okay, I definitely bought this book on the strength of its title. Geometric Regional Novel by Gert Jonker. And that's what it is. It's a book about a village and all its sort of strange bureaucratic rules and everything. And it's very kind of offbeat and off-kilter, but it was a really enjoyable read. And yet, on the other hand, it was bureaucratic. It's a bureaucratic read, but there was humour in that as well. Alessandro Zambra, Multiple Choice, that is the cover. And it is a book of stories based on multiple choice. So, if I can find... So, for example, sentence completion. In exercises 37 through 54, complete the sentence using the appropriate elements. Mark the answer that best fits the sentence. So, and the book is like this throughout. It is literally multiple choice. So, question 37. Long dash. The 1,000 amendments they've made to it, the Chilean Constitution of 1980, is a piece of shit. So what word goes at the beginning of that? So is it after the 1,000 amendments they've made? Due to the 1,000 amendments they've made? In spite of the 1,000 amendments they've made? Thanks to the 1,000 amendments they've made? Or notwithstanding? And the whole book is sort of like this. And through it, you get a sense of sort of Chilean history under sort of Pinochet and the repression. Very clever. And it's... I definitely bought this on... I saw it was called Multiple Choice, and then I read the blurb, and it said this is a book written in multiple choice. So it did probably need the blurb just to sort of underscore my decision to buy it. The Story of My Teeth, Valeria Luiselli. Charming title, The Story of My Teeth, and a charming book. I mean, I love this book. It's very quirky. Valeria Luiselli's... she's a New Yorker of Mexican descent who works very closely with the child refugees from who come across from Mexico who was unescorted. So she's she does really vital important work. But this was a charming novel, and I really recommend it. The Minotaur Takes a Cigarette Break. Well, who could resist a title like that? And it is the mythical Minotaur, as in sort of contemporary life, who's sort of keeping his head down and his horns reined in. And he's got a job as a short order chef, and he's sort of flipping burgers, and then goes back to his sort of miserable little trailer. And it's quite sad, really. But it is the Minotaur. He's sort of hiding out. He's sort of managed to sort of live all this time and keep going, and the only way he's been able to do that is to hide his identity. Tibor Fisher, Voyage to the End of the Room. So this, as with all Tibor Fisher books, this is very funny. And it's a woman who's basically agoraphobic, won't go out, but she's absolutely fascinated with the world, and she sort of has a digital travel mentality. So she travels everywhere in the world, but only digitally. She won't leave her house, and it's very amusing. And finally, One Day Soon, Time Will Have No Place Left to Hide by Christian Kiefer. This is a beautiful little edition. It's this size. And I'm going to read what the blurb says, because it's the best way to describe it, really, because it is quite an experimental book. At turns funny, tragic, triumphant and harrowing, One Day Soon, Time Will Have No Place Left to Hide is a documentary film in prose, structured as a kinoroman, which is a novella as a film script as novella. The text explores the nature of art, of watching and of being watched, of life put on display, and all the while focusing on the day-to-day existence of one couple as they work through the incendiary materials of their lives together. So basically it's a male artist who's a bit older than his life partner, who's just got pregnant, and she's sort of his manager and organising him, his life, and he is mounting an exhibition, or not an exhibition, an installation, which is this sort of huge architectural project of basically building a town, and everything is in white, and it's being documented on film. Although this book is that process, and it's a very clever, it's quite an intense book. I mean, not huge pages. You don't get a huge amount of words on the page, but there's something very intense about this reading experience. And in all, it was, it's about 200 pages of that size. So there you have it. I've definitely been influenced to buy books simply on the strength of their title. Some live up to the title, some don't. And briefly, just to conclude, as a writer, obviously you have to think very carefully about titles for your own books. And, some titles, before the project starts, you have the title. Other books you write, they might not come until the very end when you've finished it. Or they might come during the process of writing it, or you might have a working title and then change it. So there's all sorts of variables. So, for example, my last novel that was published was called An Eye for an Eye for an Eye. And what that was it's a sort of dystopian fiction where it was a retributive justice, because there was the state had gone bust, so it had no real police force to enforce law and order. So basically, it was survival of the fittest. So that's that idea of an eye for an eye for an eye. But the reason I had not just an eye for an eye, but an eye for an eye for an eye is that idea of the third eye, because two of the characters have paranormal powers in it. So it's sort of hinting at that. So that title did a lot of work for me in that. And I came by it. So I had about 6 different titles for this book, and I really couldn't decide between them. So I put a poll on my blog, and I asked readers and friends to basically vote across them, and they did. And that one won, and I was really happy with it. So there was that one. Then I had one of my books called Time After Time, which is a time travel novel. Time After Time, obviously fits that. But the actual title for that came because I compiled a song list, or a mixtape of songs, not only for accompany me while I wrote it, but those songs make an appearance in the novel. And one of the songs, which came quite late to the collection, was Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. And that fitted it perfectly. So I certainly didn't have that at the outset of the book. It came sort of part way through. Another book of mine is a sort of political novel about fundamentalist terrorism. And that's called Not in My Name, which I came to very quickly and very simply, because it was the name of a protest movement in Britain of the UK being dragged into wars in the Middle East against the will of the people. That's why you're not going to war in my name. This is down to you, HM government. And for my upcoming novel, I had a title, but it was very much tied into the cover art notion that I had as well. But because this is being published by a small independent publisher, I don't really have any say over the cover art, unlike if I'd been doing it myself. And they very quickly rejected my idea, which I'm fine about because I wasn't sure about the tone of it because it's quite a serious book, and the cover was a bit sort of jokey and potentially sort of throwaway. So my title had sort of gone with the artwork because it wasn't without the artwork it wouldn't have grabbed you. So what I did is I went back to one of the first novels I ever wrote, which I abandoned, and I sort of repurposed its title because that's one of the best things about that abandoned book. So it's called Three Dreams in the Key of G, and it'll be out sometime before the summer. So that title also came about by slightly strange manner. So there you have it. They have my thoughts on titles, and unlike book covers, I do accord great significance to them, and I can be enticed to buy a book simply on the strength of its title. But risk attends to that, and you're not always rewarded accordingly. Okay, thanks very much. Till next time.